All right, people of the pod, welcome to, I don't know, we said the last one was the season finale and then the emergency. I don't know, we're just doing a thing. Welcome to Office Hours and Karpf and Loge in the nether sphere. I have, as always, your co-host, Peter Loge, an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University and a strategic consultant. And I am joined by a mountain goat t-shirt wearing
Dave Karp, also a professor, associate professor at George Washington University in the School of Media and Public Affairs. It's office hours in between semesters, in between seasons. We just kind of wanted to talk with each other, so we thought we would record.
I do want to point out that the emergency pod was a huge hit. 109 views or 109 listens as of this morning when we're taping on Tuesday the 2nd, 125 views on YouTube. So it is a visual medium. So glad Dave shut off the show. And for us, by the way, those are rock star numbers. Like those are
huge numbers.
Huge numbers. Those are...
Listeners, if you're wondering how much company you're in, the answer is not a lot.
No, but those are sponsorship level numbers. I also want to point out, I love this meta-ness of it. The emergency office hours we taped was actually taped during Dave and my office hours. Mm-hmm. And during that time, Dave had a student waiting in the hallway who actually wanted to see him during office hours, but the student come in because he was busy taping office hours with me. So it was very, I don't know, these things make me happy. As always, thank you, Alana, our producer. Thank you, our listeners and our viewers. Tell your friends. We clearly need more of them. You know exactly how many we have now. There are two more things I want to bring about the pod. As some of you are a regular listener may recall, several weeks ago, somebody emailed in asking a question saying, I'm interviewing for a policy comms job. What advice do you and Dave have for policy comms? And on the podcast, we offered some advice, and she was offered the job. And she could have been offered the job because she's well-respected, well-liked senior communications professional in DC with decades of experience at really top levels at really big organizations, or it could be because a couple of middle-aged white guys made some cracks and offered some off-the-cuff comments. So clearly the credit all goes to us, I think.
It is 21st century America. Credit the white guys.
Credit the white guys.
America. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a cool guy. She's really good. She's been a client of mine over the years. Really smart and really good. And she's actually looking at a couple of different offers, and I know we'll succeed in either, in spite of our wisecracking. I think that the last episode of it was also called Ramshackle and Unhinged, which I thought was meant as compliments. So
now, which one of us is Ramshackle and which one is Unhinged?
Ramshackle is very great bar band. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Ramshackle here with Unhinged.
I do think for faculty meetings next year, the two of us should have those nicknames.
Ramshackle and Unhinged.
Right? Yeah. Next up, Professor Ramshackle. I think that'll go over great. I think so.
What could we're looking for new ways to alienate our colleagues and go fucking Karpf and Loge, man. All right, let's get to it. This has been self-indulgent and entertaining, but we've wasted 3 minutes and 24 seconds on it. We've got a bunch of stuff. Some of which is new, most of which is actually like last season. What do you got, Dave?
Yeah, I feel like this is the callbacks episode.
We're gonna go with Hazen
right
the
now.
Memory. I think we do the wavy things. There was the time when Dave had a different Mountain Goats t-shirt on.
It was probably the same Mountain Goats t-shirt. Yeah, so I think first one up, Bloomberg is reporting, and this is based on a report that just came out from NewsGuard. Back in January, I wrote a piece on Substack about how we need to start getting worried about AI content farms. That there was the old era of content farms ruining everything. There was like 2010 or so. Demand media was the big one I've written a bunch about over the years. It's even in my book, Analytic Activism. But we had this era in which people realized that it was cheap to produce junk content that could scoop up Google ads. And so they did that. They found that hole in the system and they scooped out the money. And that worked until Google kind of stepped in and said, we're going to be the regulator of last resort. We're going to change your algorithm. You can't do this anymore. And I started back in January getting really freaked out that that's probably going to come again, because instead of having to pay a few freelancers, you just need to enter things into ChatGPT or a similar chatbot. And that's probably just going to lead to a flood of misinformation and or just content farming, like, just like junk news, because it is the costs are falling to zero and the profits are larger than zero. So Bloomberg is already reporting based on this NewsGuard study. There's already a few dozen of those sites doing that. They aren't making big money yet, but they're making money because, again, their costs are basically zero. And that's the tip of the iceberg. The question that's still out there that the Bloomberg reporter, contacted Google, contacted everybody else and said, what are you doing about this? And they were all like, well, we've got our policies, we're looking into it. But of course, the problem here is since Google and Facebook and Microsoft are all now trying to win the AI race, it's not clear that they're going to step in and shut this stuff down the way they did a decade ago. So like broadly, this is a callback to something that I wrote back in January. B, it's a bad callback because we never want to be living in the future that Dave saw coming, right? Like I am the bummer at any party. And when I'm right about the trajectory of society, that's a bad sign because I'm such a bummer. So yeah, the news out right now it's looking like Dave's worries were warranted. And that should send a chill down all of our listeners' spine because Dave is supposed to be delightfully provocative, but hopefully wrong.
It actually gets worse. It actually gets worse. So there's we're going to layer in a Washington Post report. All of this will go in the footnotes that I'll put on peterloge.com podcast and on Medium. The Washington Post is reporting that some Republican operatives are set up what is meant to look like local news sites, but is really just cutting and pasting Republican messaging and a lot of Republican op-eds and opinions online, and they can use the chatbots to farm additional news, right? So you can take these AI bot-driven quote unquote news sites. The editorial slant can be conservative. It can look like news, it can look like local news, but it's effectively political news, which acts as a shout back to a piece I wrote in The Hill earlier this year, which was really profoundly mediocre. But I made the argument that, bots are going to produce news. Republican candidates or any candidate is going to flood that. So it looks like there's news, great things for the bots to write about, which will then be repurposed and repushed. So you're going to have campaign bots talking to news bots, feeding all of our social media streams, providing, a chunk of the news that a lot of people get. And then at some point in November, we're all going to go vote. So it'll be a campaign made up entirely of robots talking to each other. And at the end, presumably we get to decide, which is not, as these things go, good. And it's something to which campaign operatives are paying a lot of attention. We've talked about campaigns and elections in the past. It's a professional site, B2B thing for the political candidate campaign industry, pollsters, media people, phone people, folks like that. They're having a conference this coming week in National Harbor here in DC on campaign technology. It's a 2-day conference on campaign technology. And I'm guessing like a third maybe is devoted to AI, generative AI, and AI in general. I'm actually moderating a panel on it. One of our alumni, Madeline Toomey, is one of the keynote speakers. She's really big in this space. So campaigns are using this already to do better targeting, to find out what people are reading, just use AI for what AI has been used for, but also using generative AI to produce at least first draft content and quite possibly more.
Yeah, and so one thing I want to flag here is, so campaigns are starting to use it. I want to stress it's not clear that this stuff is better than what these campaigns are currently doing.
Right.
This is cheaper. Right. Well, what we are looking at right now is the coming flood of cheap nonsense. And that's going to have effects. It's not necessarily going to, I don't want us to end up sort of redoing the Cambridge Analytica panic where people said like, oh my God, they're controlling people's minds. Like the AI is not going to control people's minds. It's just going to be a flood of shit. And that flood of shit has impacts in terms of governability, because it's going to lead once again to our political elites believing, yeah, no one's actually aware of what I do. So I can just do what my biggest campaign donors ask me to do. Like whatever Harlan Crow wants so I can get invited to hang out in the giant mansion with the Nazi garden. Cool. Like I'm going to do that so I can go to the giant mansion. It's not like anyone's ever going to know. So like that's the coming flood. The other thing I want to note that's relevant on this, Jeffrey Hinton, who was rightfully described as the godfather of our current AI moment. This is a guy who was a research scientist specializing in neural networks back when neural networks looked like a complete dead end amongst the research community. And it was he and his lab were the ones who had the first breakthroughs that when you scale these things up and you make them bigger, you start having real effects. Pretty much every principal scientist at every major company right now is a former student of his or a former student of one of his. And he's been working at Google for the past several years. He just resigned from Google, not because he thinks Google in specific has been bad on this, but because he has gone from thinking that this is such an amazing opportunity that it like everyone must research it, to staring at it and saying, okay, we're going to be so awash in misinformation and other bad effects that I can no longer take part in this. I now need to step back so that I can call out the problems. Like the people who were developing this, who were had the most at stake in telling us it was going to be great, are now getting terrified, not because they think like artificial intelligence is about to be smarter than us and overtake the world, but because they're seeing the immediate near-term effects of turning turning this spigot on without any limits, any controls.
I think there are two things to add to that are, again, more throwbacks, right? So regular listeners, this is the remember when episode. We've both pointed out that this is a mixed bag, right? This is neither a shining city upon a hill, nor is it, the robot overlords. The good news is, again, that I pointed out in the Hill piece, that the barrier to entry for candidates is now super low. You don't need to hire a big deal consultant. You don't need to know what a consultant is or how to find them. If you want to run for city council, you can produce credible first drafts of social media content, op-eds, position papers, talking points for free. So it's easier, it's less expensive, it takes less time, which seems, if you believe in participatory democracy, it allows more people to participate, right? So you've got that piece of it. You've also got, though, the downside to flooding the zone with everything politician, like nobody cares what I'm doing. Even if somebody is caught, something, again, you and I have talked about in the past, if somebody's legitimately caught doing something bad, they can just say, no, it wasn't me, it was the bot, right? In hindsight, Donald Trump in 2016 saying the Hollywood Access tape, hey, I'm Donald Trump, what are you going to do? Like, in hindsight, that was a brilliant strategy. At the time, we all thought it was foolish. In 2024, he could say, wasn't me.
Yeah.
Are you going to believe me or your lying eyes?
I don't think that's even real. And then his supporters all yell that as well, and you're in that mess. Yeah.
And then, right. The last thing on AI before we move on, because we're belaboring this, is I had an interesting assignment, legitimately interesting assignment to my political communication ethics class last week. I asked the students to ask ChatGPT or a similar service to write an essay on some element of ethics and political communication, and then respond to GPT. So they asked it, they wrote responses. One of them didn't like the answer, so asked it to write an essay in my voice, using my bio. It said I worked for Senator Dodd. I have not worked for Senator Dodd. Another engaged basically in a conversation with GPT. Several actually did that. And one asked it a question that one of our guest speakers raised about how you navigate a complicated ethical situation. Fascinating back and forth about how it went. And the other thing is that it's an example. The consensus was these essays were fine as far as they went, but they didn't go very far. Which means I'm now going to assign this, I think, earlier in this semester, so students see what like fine but not great writing is, so they know kind of what to avoid. Don't write like GPT. Don't GPT this. But I thought it was an interesting experiment. Anyway, we got more stuff. Time's ticking. Tempest fugit, Dave.
Speaking of labor, the writer's strike.
Speaking of labor, wow, well done. Well done. The writer's strike.
Belaboring things.
Belabor. That was out of solidarity with their brothers and sisters on the picket lines in the Writers Guild of America. We also failed to write anything today. We're just, it's not that we're lazy or distracted. It's that we're good. It's that we're good people.
Yeah. Wouldn't cross that picket line by really prepping.
We're with you in spirit, Mike. Sure.
So what do you got? What are you noting so far on the writer's strike?
So the writer's strike is actually potentially a really big deal. You've got, I think it's 11,000 members of the WGA East and West who've been negotiating with the Association of film television producers, which is the negotiating arm for TV and film studios. Been negotiating for months over whether or not to go on strike, working conditions, pay, this sort of thing. And they failed to reach an agreement. The Writers Guild, according to press reports, the Writers Guild are pretty far apart. The producers don't think they're so far apart. One of the ways I think this is also the first strike since 2007. So they narrowly averted one in 2017. In 2007, they went on strike for 100 days. One of the results of the 2007 strike is we got more unscripted television, reality TV, including bumping up a then flailing Donald Trump and his Apprentice franchise. And he got much more play because there was no scripted television. For the love of all that is right and just and true in democracy, resolve this strike. You saw what happened last time.
Give the writers what they want. Otherwise,
give them what they want because democracy demands it. The writer, I think this is being framed in interesting ways. I think there are a number of comms lessons here, one of which comes to your sweet spot, which I'll kick to you in a sec. The first is the writers are framing this as the producers want to make this a gig economy. They want to move us to a gig economy. So they're framing it as, hey, everybody's caught in the gig economy. Nobody likes not having benefits, the uncertainty. We are like Uber drivers, dog walkers, things like that. Don't put us in that camp. That's bad. They also talk about mini rooms. And they're talking about basically being treated unfairly as workers. And many of them are. I've got no doubts about that. I know people in the industry, it's a hard way to make a living, but it's also sort of interesting to see people making bazillions of dollars saying, hey, I'm just like an Uber driver in the gig economy. On the producer side, they're saying that no, the writers want to be paid for work they're not doing. They want us to put them in writer's room and guarantee them an income, even if they're not working. So they're pitching this as writers being lazy. And by the way, the producers are saying we're losing tons of money. And they are. I mean, Disney's laying off tons of people. Networks are laying off tons of people. The streaming services went up and then they plateaued and they had no plan B. So they're saying now is the worst time ever. We don't have any money. You want us to pay you for work you're not doing, which is how they're framing it. Which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But there's a social media play from 2007. Mm-hmm. That's your cue. You're the social media guy, digital media guy.
Sure. So
we really solidarity of the writers is not working.
I want to just react on that, which is like, yeah, I've written a bit on how the streaming services, their valuation was based on their growth rather than their profit. The golden age of TV couldn't or couldn't last forever. And yeah, we're in a phase shift right now. It's also the case though for these executives who are saying, oh God, our finances are so bad right now. Like HBO and Discovery, Discovery just bought HBO, layering all of this debt on it. Like you cannot, on the one hand, go on a bunch of like a debt-based acquisition, like a spending spree, and then turn around and say, oh God, we're in such debt. We don't have money to pay our writers. Like paying the writers is the most basic cost of, or one of the most basic costs of producing television. If you can't do that, then get out of television. And it drives me crazy, particularly because since we last spoke, BuzzFeed News shut down. There's been a lot of great writing this week from brilliant writers who happen to be alumni of BuzzFeed News, and hell, like the thing won a Pulitzer.
Recently,
reflecting on the past decade of online news and how it's sort of the era of the teens is coming to a close. And the biggest lesson from that is the financial models there never quite made sense. And instead what we had was roughly the equivalent of a gig economy. Like we now have so many incredibly well-trained reporters and writers with no stable jobs because we've just trusted that money from Google and Facebook ads will flow forever and all make sense. While at the top, you've got like financiers constantly doing debt-based acquisitions, then turning around and saying, oh, there's no money in this. Look, I just, borrowed 13 billion and put the money, like put the debt on the company that I bought. Like things need to be profitable, but also they need to be profitable while also paying your workers. Pay the damn workers. Jesus.
So I think this is without taking sides in this strike, and my heart would always
sides.
my heart would always be with the writers, in part because that's where my friends are and I agree with your arguments. But I think politically, how does this shape up? But the writers, I think, are doing a better job of framing it from the jump, which is they're saying this is an existential threat to writing. and to the writing industry and how they're treated. And they're calling it the gig economy. They want to turn writing into the gig economy. So they're locating themselves in the same box as laid off journalists, which is going to make journalists write more favorably about them. It's going to make them appear more favorable in the eyes of the public, because it could look like a baseball strike, right? I used to actually, in full disclosure, I used to lobby and consult for the Caucus for Television Producers, Writers, and Directors, which are all the hyphenates. And these are the guys who are really in a jam in this, right? Because on one hand they're producing, on the other hand they're writing. So I have a dog in this fight.
Mhm.
But I think it risks looking like the millionaires versus the billionaires, or the billionaires versus the bazillionaires. And the writers, by saying this is the gig economy, is doing a good job of locating them as workers producing a product on which we rely, versus mega global corporations who take on debt for fun and punish their employees as a result.
Right. So I think the trick there, I don't know the finances of writers, but you're going to be in a spot where the most well-known, like most people don't know the names of TV writers, right? And then the TV writers whose names you would know, Mindy Kaling, Mike Schur, are people who are certainly going to be millionaires. That's the reason we know their names, is because they've been so successful. But the vast majority of TV writers, I would guess, are not millionaires. They're people who are really funny on Twitter. Right. Like, so they're funny on Twitter. They're better. Like, one advantage they have here is, like, in terms of comms, you always like, the side that's going to do better at comms is probably the side that is full of better writers. So, like, advantage writers there. But these are people with like medium-sized audiences on Twitter because they are clever, they are funny, and they've been sort of making jokes and building their following probably for a decade or so. But these are not the millionaires against the billionaires the way it is with baseball. These are people whose names you don't know, but who write and create the shows that you enjoy.
Right. And it's a lot of writers, if you go to a writer's room, they'll work on a show for 3 or 4 or 5 years, make a ton of money, and then not work again, like, ever.
Well, that's only for shows that go through syndication, but the
syndication rules have changed. After FinCEN's demise, syndication rules have changed, and the streaming services have changed syndication. So one of the points of dispute in this is residuals. Right. And we can get into vertical integration in some other podcast, but that was just a disaster. But the point is, some writers are consistently good over time. Some writers are great early and just live on that. Right. Max Munchnick, classmate of mine at Emerson College, actually created Will and Grace, Boston Common, Good Morning Miami, Shit My Dad Says. I think he changed television and changed the face of America, arguably, with Will and Grace, but he hasn't had a hit show in a long time. Max is fine because Will and Grace was Will and Grace.
Yeah.
I know other writers who wrote very well for shows you've seen for 2, 3, 4 years, and then don't work. And so they make money and then they stop. Right. Yeah. There are endless stories of people moving to Hollywood saying, how hard could it be here? I'll look at the number of used BMWs for sale. Like, everybody must drive a BMW. It's like, actually, no, everybody has to unload a BMW to pay the rent. Anyway, so the other politics of it, though, for our comms listeners, are 2 pieces to this. There's a piece, there's one case study that neither you nor I have had time to read yet, because I found it roughly 27 minutes ago. Looking at how the writers use social media in 2007 to organize. And the other is a challenge for activists, which is, how do you organize a dispersed labor force? Right. So high schools or teachers are relatively easy because everybody's in the same building and you walk out from the same place. And it's someplace everybody sees, factory floor, Amazon warehouses, Starbucks. TV writers are distributed across Los Angeles, which is, are you kidding me, big? They're in New York, they're in Atlanta. Some of them work remotely. How do you organize a dispersed labor force that doesn't have, and then how do you get them to show in a place that really very rarely has a recognizable, like, it doesn't look like a high school or a warehouse, which is an organizing challenge.
Yeah, it is, though. It's the 2 things that stand out for me. One, social media. We have a different social media now than we did in 2007. We also just have a different TV unit. I mean, 2007 is pre-streaming. It's forever ago. But they have the experience of 2007. And while a lot of writers in their 20s weren't on the picket line then, there are older writers who were, and like WGA has that experience of an ultimately successful strike. and we have the social memory of what it's like when the writers go on strike. And not only do we get filled with Celebrity Apprentice, but we also get like half a season of The Office, like single tier
Oh,
out there.
Mike Schur, shout out, another shout out to Mike Schur.
He's very good.
Yes.
But also, I mean, after COVID, I think that's less of a, like, in some ways that ends up being less of a challenge because these are communicators. And again, they've got social media profiles. They're used to talking and being funny on social media. But they've also got Slack groups, right? Like there's all of the organizational work that you do when you are not geographically co-located that we had to do for a couple of years when we just weren't geographically co-located in our jobs. And they're going to bring that set of habits over to this strike. Now, what I would say is, this is either a thing that gets resolved real quick, or it probably takes a few months because the impact, like part of the deal with streaming, the only things that we're watching live, and I guess what we're maybe watching SNL, maybe some people are watching the late night shows, that'll get hit right away. But beside that, since most of the shows that people are going to watch for the next few months are already in the can, the hit is going to happen downstream. So people are not going to notice right away a major change in their viewing habits. We don't have TV seasons the way we did in 2007. We've got streaming shows that are coming out every month. So that's a thing that will pick up steam slowly, and then we'll feel the impact later.
I think that's absolutely right. The late night shows have already gone dark. SNL's going dark. Most of their other stuff is in the can. The film industry won't be affected until probably September. You're not going to notice it until then. The open questions are, what about foreign production, right? Netflix is better positioned than some of the other content consumers or producers, just because they've got so much foreign production. And I haven't been able to sort out or figure out which ones will or will not follow the WGA. Right, Netflix actually does a pretty good job of picking up foreign content and either dubbing it or just recycling it and putting it up with captions, and they're pushing into foreign audiences anyway, because everybody who's going to buy Netflix in the US is already subscribed to Netflix. We did during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so, but I think everything I'm reading is this is protracted, because the nature of television has changed. Right, for fans of the history of the industry, up until for their TV, when there were 3 networks, they owned all of their production. They produced everything in-house. Everything was done in-house. TV producers, writers, and directors said, actually, this is limiting content. You're limiting what the American people can see. Some number of productions have to be produced independently. That way, we get a variety of voices. And you entered the era of FinCEN. Finance and syndication rules, and some percentage had to be produced independently, which gave rise to a lot of really great television and a lot of really bad television. But the goal was to get 13 episodes to get to syndication, then you live on the residuals, because 13 episodes was enough to go into syndication. Cable comes along. The TV networks say, look, we've got cable. There's an endless number of outlets for an endless number of shows. We don't need FinCEN anymore. And Congress and the court said, yeah, that makes sense. Right, because there's a finite amount of broadcast airspace. There's an infinite amount of cable space. We'll do that. FinCEN goes away. The nets buy cable. So the networks then re-vertically integrated. So the only independently produced shows are those that can't be rerun, because networks make money on reruns of Big Bang Theory, The Office, Parks and Rec, and the rest. The ones that can't be rerun are reality television, because we all know who won The Bachelor or who got fired from The Apprentice, right? So they're going to continue because they're not unionized, because those shows aren't technically written, right? And I think with streaming, we've seen another similar shift where we have to FinCEN. You're just changing the financial model of the industry. The demise of FinCEN led to a lot of people making a lot of money, and a lot of people who used to make a lot of money not making money anymore. Right. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. That's not a political thing. That's a media economics thing, but I kind of geek out on that.
Sure.
Anyway,
let's switch gears. There's a couple of interesting activism bits that I want to yell about.
Yes, good, because we're hitting 30 minutes, so yell about activism bits.
Yeah. So first, this is another callback. The climate activists deciding to smear paint on art thing has up until now been a thing that happens every month or two in Europe. We just had, I believe, the first instance of this here in Washington, D.C., where a couple of climate activists went into where was it, the National Gallery of Art, and smeared painting on the glass sculpture case around a Degas sculpture. And then like made a speech to the tourists who were in the room before they got pulled out. And I just again want to use my old climate activist bona fides to say, don't fucking do this. Don't fucking do. Because I feel like some of the most basic strategic concepts are, think like 2 steps ahead, right? How is my action today, which feels good, and like what I want to grant to them is like, what they are doing is brave and it is costly. Like, I do not doubt your bravery or your commitment. I doubt your strategic sense making. Because the natural outcome of this is you look like annoying villains, and the state is going to respond by upping security for public events and for art areas in order to or for exhibitions, museums. And then you're going to write an op-ed saying, this is the millions that are now getting spent to protect artwork from activists trying to make a statement. First of all, that's anti-free speech, but also we should be putting that money towards climate adaptation. And that'll be a lovely op-ed, which everyone will ignore because politicians will have realized, oh, it's actually really quite popular to run against the loony climate activists smearing paint on priceless work or around priceless works of art. They are viewed as bad guys. They no longer have the sympathy of the public. So let me treat them as villains instead of, Exxon as the villain. That's going to go badly for you. Like, you can be right and also not helpful. I can understand the desperation that's leading to this. Desperation is not a plan. Don't do things that are obviously going to undermine your ability to act well in the future. Like, it's just a dumb tantrum tactic. I can't believe it's been a year and they're still doing this shit. Knock it off.
As a theme we've come back to again and again on this podcast is you have to think what now, what next, then what?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the failure to get to the then what? What now? We're going to smear stuff. Then what next? Well, we're going to write an op-ed. They'll be protesting. Okay, and then what? Something, climate solutions. It's the old underpants gnome theory of politics.
Yeah. Now, the thing that I do want to grant, since it's climate, it's difficult to get to the then what, because this is so all-encompassing that I don't think there's an obvious plan that if we do X, Y, and Z, then we will actually transform the global economy to the point that we can have a sustainable climate future. Like, I get the instinct to freak out, but that means at a minimum, you need to be able to tell yourselves the stories that a story that the actions we take today are going to leave us with a larger, stronger, more committed movement in the future that better positions us to be able to do things we can't do today. If you are not building a movement, if you are not in some way leading those in power to take you more seriously or respond more openly in the future, you ain't helping. And the stakes are too high to just say, what we should do is get a lot of attention and then congratulate ourselves because we got a lot of attention. Not fucking helping.
All right.
Second thing, the state of Utah. This one's funny.
Yes.
So there's some activism going on in Utah because apparently Utah passed a bill saying that any site that hosts pornographic images and videos needs to be really on the ball in verifying the age of its visitors, right? So like no underage people in the state of Utah should be able to visit porn sites. They're going to put that responsibility on the porn sites. PornHub, the biggest porn site, has responded to this as of yesterday by shutting down all access to PornHub in the state of Utah and releasing a statement from, I think, a porn star, explaining their actions and their demands. This is hilarious because at least from what I've read so far, Utah is apparently the state with the highest per capita consumption of porn of any state in the United States. Go Mormons, you do you. And so there's a bunch of pissed off Mormons right now who can't tell each other why they're pissed off, which is just delightfully funny, I think. I think the action is really bold. I'm curious what it's going to translate into, because again, usually if you take away people's access to a thing that they want, explain why, and say contact public officials, people will do that. I think they're going to be a little more reticent to do that here, because I think all the Mormons in Utah who were consuming porn but not admitting it to each other probably aren't going to call up their state official and admit it. But it's a strong tactic. I thought personally, I thought the messaging was kind of garbage. It was pretty garbled in terms of explaining why they needed to take this action, because it seems like the honest answer is Utah just passed a measure that is almost impossible for these sites to comply with, and then when they fail to comply with them, they can get sued out of existence. So like, hey y'all, like, sure, but pass a different measure that's better worded. Seems to be what they're really asking for. But like the messaging is kind of garbage, but like, my God, what a beautifully bold tactic with such an entertaining outcome, that if you're in the state of Utah, sorry, you can't explain to people why you're really frustrated right now.
All right. On that note, I want to do one last plug. If you get a chance, if any of you out there are in cities that happen to have the Amy Poehler, Tina Fey Restless Lake tour coming through town, see it. It's funny, and it is a remarkable collection of middle-aged white women in one place. We saw it. They were in DC last weekend. They're in Boston and I think Chicago. I don't know if the tour is going to continue, but with the writer's strike, what else are they going to do? They may as well stay on tour. And it really is. Constitution Hall it's like Bethesda moms, like the entire city just tilted up, and they all just kind of rolled into DAR Constitution Hall. It was a very funny show.
That sounds great.
Really talented.
That sounds fantastic. I wish I knew someone who could have told me about that in advance.
Apparently they also set a record for selling merch on opening night. Also tells you a lot about the people who go. Here's a $3 ticket to see two remarkable stars.
That was probably a thing that Dave would have enjoyed and you could have told him about. No,
I was a passenger.
Do we not talk to each other often enough that you could tell me this is going to town?
I was a passenger in this bus. I was told, hey, we got tickets. Let's go. By my lovely young wife. So I think middle-aged white women who poured into DAR Constitution Hall.
I think for the next season of Office Hours, I think we need to start making this instead of a bi-weekly podcast, it's being a daily podcast, just so I can find out things like this from you, since apparently we don't talk enough. This is what I'm getting from this, is we don't talk enough, and so I miss out. Thanks.
Yeah. Putting in a plug for somebody else, and suddenly it's about Dave. I was trying to, I don't know. All right, people of the pod, it's been 37 minutes, 40 seconds, which is really probably about 30 minutes too long. Thanks for tuning in as always. Thanks, Alana. Tell your friends, rate us, like us. We're with your writers, clearly, because we didn't prep any of this show. See you next time, everybody.
Bye.